entry that I'd made into my journal, and I noticed that while I was making this entry, I accidentally confused the first phrase, so I had to rewrite it. And in order to convey the same meaning that I was supposed to have conveyed in just one sentence, I had to use several. I believe it was 2. And I never really got around to capturing what the original phrase was, because that's kind of how the stream of consciousness goes. It just, it produces these gems and then it disappears. But the whole nature of the comment was actually about, incidentally, the unconscious and the stream of consciousness, and whether or not we should prioritize journaling dreams over recording ideas. And the nature of this conclusion I'd come to was something along the lines of saying, well, it's better to surrender about 10 seconds worth of argument material and to lose that argument, figuratively speaking and literally, over the course of something like 5 minutes, journaling a dream, than to surrender 5 minutes worth of dream material and to lose that within just the 10 seconds it takes to record an argument. Now, when I committed this to print, I accidentally wrote that it's better to surrender 5 minutes worth of dream material, which is not true. But the reason I wrote it that way was because in that stream of consciousness, you're bound to try to catch all of the really elusive points first. Because really, that's what the comment's made about. Even though it insists that you shouldn't hoard your ideas, it's still trying to hoard that as an idea. It's still trying to make its way out of just, the release of things. It's trying to hold on. And so there's a bit of a de facto dyslexia going on in that instance. Well, someone like Sigmund Freud, a reductionist, would insist, you see, that's the unconscious talking. That's the unconscious mind telling you that deep down you really want to surrender journaling your dreams. Or you don't have enough faith in your dreams that you might be able to journal them after having spent about 10 seconds doing something else. That you're actually being unconsciously lazy under the auspices of spiritual bypassing. I don't believe that to be the case. In fact, I know it not to be the case. You'd be hard-pressed to convince me that the time spent trying to monitor one's unconscious is really done in unconscious ignorance. Only in a few instances is it possible to take dream interpretation to an extreme against the very auspices of the unconscious, and in that case the unconscious probably wouldn't even accommodate you. It wouldn't grant you access to those dreams, and you think for some other entirely different reason that you forgot the dreams as such. Well, ultimately I did remember the quote that I was trying to remember. I did jot it down, but it kept me wondering. It kept me wondering about several things. First of all, where does this dyslexia come from? The dyslexia must clearly not be on the part of consciousness, but it must be on the part of the unconscious. And that being established, it must not be on the part of the unconscious, it must be on the part of consciousness. There's another example. And while I was elaborating on this, another thought crossed my mind, and that is, don't get me right. And I realized that this is really what decisively disproves Freud's whole point about free association. Don't get me right is not the obverse of don't get me wrong. It doesn't reveal the obverse of don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong is insisting, look, I don't want you to misinterpret what I'm saying. But don't get me right has 2 meanings. One of them is I don't want you to side with what I'm saying, which is not the opposite of misunderstanding. And the other is that I don't want you to actually understand what I'm saying, and that is the obverse of misunderstanding. But so long as both of those are interpretations of getting me right, are interpretations of it, you can't reduce it to one or the other. You can't insist that I'm trying to mislead you, that I don't want you to actually know what I'm saying, but to simply agree with me, because, well, then I'd be saying, no, I do want you to get me right. Like, you can't argue that interpretation because it actually conflicts. Because well, it's obvious. There's the other interpretation, and that is that I don't want you to side with me. But that doesn't work with understanding me. Because if I want you to understand me and understand me to be wrong, then how can you trust anything that I say? The simple fact of the matter is you can't. So either one of these interpretations, because it excludes the other interpretation, is false. And you can't insist that that's what I'm actually saying. Because if I were trying to mislead you, I would tell you, no, do get me right. Don't make any mistake about what I'm saying. And do understand me to be right. But I'm not telling you to be right. So, free association is not a good theory to use in this case. So again, where does this dyslexia come from? Why do we confuse things? Why do we slip up? Is it a revelation from the unconscious? No. It's simply that when we're in a stream of consciousness, it's very hard to gather all our bearings. The ideas come to us, and we sometimes funnel them into the audience before we've arranged them. Because there's a stream of consciousness, and then there's the rational thought process, and the rational thought process makes sense of them in such a way that can be presented to someone else. And that presentation is supposed to mirror what one intuitively feels to be the truth. But if reason has been, even for the slightest moment, subverted, then the stream of consciousness will just continue on directly from the thinker to the audience, without that mediator who's able to interpret it and organize it into the fashion that best mirrors the truth. It's much like you're spilling paint and you don't get the opportunity to actually arrange it into a picture. It looks like nonsense, doesn't it? And in the same way, debaters love to exploit those contradictions, and it's very abusive. Now, I've already stated what my original message was. It is that that it is better, I should say, to lose an argument worth a few seconds over the course of 5 minutes it takes to record a dream than to surrender a dream worth 5 minutes over the course of 10 seconds it takes to record an argument. And when I first came up with this, I felt like it was perfect. It was perfectly adapted to my audience. But I found that the deviation that came about through my accidental dyslexia was even better. It was much more complete. It was much more, it wasn't as concise, but it was much clearer. And I'll reproduce that, but the point is,